Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Movement Radio. I am Chip Hazard,
I'm Talon Williams.
I'm Roger Sierra.
I'm
and
Philip
we are
Weber. I know you're going to
yes.
introduce me anyway, but I figured I'd just jump in because it felt like a flow thing.
It
So,
no, you are more than welcome. But let me say,
Absolutely,
we
absolutely.
are joined by the uber talented Philip Weber. Philip, how's it going today?
it's going. Thank you very much for that introduction. I guess check cleared. Yes, thank you. I'm doing well. It's a Sunday. It's a little chilly here. Well, chilly by Texas standards, which is fine. It's a lazy Sunday morning, so it's awesome.
What whereabouts of Texas are you in right now?
I am in a town called McKinney, which is about half hour north of Dallas proper. So still part of the Metroplex, but far enough away that I don't have to go by the folks' place all the time.
That's cool.
Definitely understand that. So we usually typically start off these conversations with just a very simple question: Who is Philip Weber?
So Philip Weber is a grew up in Dallas, moved around a lot because of radio, and is back in Dallas after being away. Toy enthusiast, voiceover, cartoon enthusiast, kid that never grew up. Um, just ask my kids. And someone who wishes he could pay the mortgage with some of his hobbies, but is very happy being a small player in all the fun podcast, animation, anime, cartooning stuff that I do. So that's kind of me in a very bumpy nutshell. If not to offend anybody, recovering Catholic in a 12 station program. So I'm doing okay. And yeah, having fun being what's going on. Yeah.
Awesome. So Chip asked the question, "Who are you?" I'm going to ask the question, "Who were you before you got into?" I guess really your upbringing. You said you were born in Dallas.
Yep.
Um, did you always have this attraction to like superheroes and comic books? Like when did you first really start getting into comic books and superheroes and things of that nature?
Golly. I was actually just discussing this with my wife the other day. When I was a kid, growing up, I don't remember when it really started. Probably being a child of the 70s when I saw reruns of the old Filmation Superman cartoons, and then, Super Friends. As smarmy and silly as it was, I still hold it very near and dear to my heart. And even some of the older those 1960s Spider-Man cartoons with a really cool theme, and some of those almost I would even call them motion comics that they had
Mhm.
for the Incredible Hulk and Captain America from the 60s and stuff. I've always been a huge animation fan, and because superheroes just somehow kind of ooched in there somehow, um, been into that as well the whole time. I think, probably when I was pretty young, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, is where I'm assuming all that stuff really kind of kicked in. Before comic book stores were a thing, my favorite thing to do for my birthday is my grandmother would take me to the Army Navy surplus store and we'd buy lots of really cheap comics. And so I still have long boxes, much to my wife and family's chagrin, in a closet here. And full of comics and animation. Thank goodness to DVD and streaming. I've got lots of stuff, collections of that. And I've always really been kind of into it. I was always a big fan of animation, still am, of every form, sort, genre, etc. Um, Kind of knew early on, thanks to my dad and old time radio, who the major players were, like Mel Blanc, June Foray, Dawes Butler, those voiceover people. So they've always been huge heroes and influences to me. And so honestly, because this unfortunately is probably going to answer the next question, but I'm going to merge into it anyway. When working in radio and doing some stuff for production, more kind of humor and production imaging type stuff for the shows that I work for, not officially on the air as a disc jockey, but doing other stuff. Kind of melded into kind of like the audio drama podcast boom that happened, really started, I think, in the early 2000s.
Hmm.
I just kind of jumped on that with just Take Me Anywhere, and I was devouring that part of it for quite a while.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
We actually got the opportunity to record a couple of bits from our improv theater
Oh,
here in Chattanooga, where they did two skits from the old time radio, and how they made the sound effects and all that. And it just, I was so amazed at how that came to be. And then, you just kind of close your eyes and listen, and it draws you right in. Uh, so I wish there was more of that
I
in
kind of agree.
2024.
I think and anybody who may have watched any things like the Prairie Home Companion, the types of things that they did, um, and I know there's an audience out there. I just don't know. Unfortunately, in this day and age, it's like, how do I monetize it? It's like I don't care. I just want to be part of it. Speaking of improv, I did a little stuff with the Second City a while ago, mostly stage managing and back scenes, but seeing a lot of that stuff happen and kind of being, in the stage manager behind the scenes part of that. Um, I'd like to hope that some of it kind of wore off on me a little bit. I love being part of it. I love and miss live theater, and I do think that um, doing like an audio drama or comedy, even improvised, would be so much fun. And I'm pretty sure there's an audience out there for it.
Oh yeah.
And You guys got the wheels spinning and the drool starting, because I just want to be part of that again so much. But day jobs have to pay the bills, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. But
Yep.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at right now too.
yeah, I mean, and I was really interested in, when I was in college, I went on a trip to Los Angeles and got to visit a real Foley stage when that was a thing, and all that kind of stuff, background sound effects and stuff for radio dramas as well, has always been fascinating to me too.
Yeah. It's interesting to see like that there's podcasts out there where it's like an old time radio show that you would listen to back in the day. Like there's one that I listened to called Welcome to Night Vale,
Mm-hmm.
and it's similar to that as well. I didn't start listening to them, and I think it was 10 years ago I started listening
Okay.
to them, and they're
Yep.
still doing shows. They do it like they do two episodes twice a month,
Mm-hmm.
like two episodes a month, and it's just extended into 10 years later. It's like, man, these guys are still making content 10 years later. That's crazy to me, you know? Um, so yeah, that's one. And then there's a couple of other ones I could probably put you. Matter of fact, Chip, didn't we have uh something like that? Like when we first started, like what was it? Sending the Clowns, I think was the podcast that you were talking about. Yeah, so there was
Yeah.
one.
It's
Um,
uh it's a British podcast where they do skit comedy. Pretty much it's improv with sound effects and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And we did when we first started back in 2019, we did some cross promotion and everything, so that was really cool.
yeah.
Very, very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I in 2000 in 2005, I went to go work for ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut, and I also kind of connected with this company called Pendant Audio. They did a bunch of At the time, they did a bunch of fan cast shows. The first thing I think I did with them was a kind of foppy, you know, concierge waiter or something like that for an Indiana Jones sequel podcast that they did. And they also did a bunch of things with DC Comics, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. They were so much fun, and I did a lot of stuff with them. And then that kind of branched over to some other um, podcast companies like golly, the only other one I can think of off the top of my head, stupid early onset Alzheimer's, is darker projects. They also did something. There's one called the Byron Chronicles that I was part of. Just some really cool, fun stuff. I think I love the idea of doing the improvisation part of it too, because that's just something that's, I don't want to say comes natural to me, but that's kind of like the whole, I think that helps enliven or bring just so much a different kind of energy. Than, not that there's anything wrong with people recording their parts separately, because that is what a lot of animation is anyway too, but I think having people in the same room riffing off each other and all that kind of stuff is just, that's magic to me. I would love to be part of something like that again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Circle it back. What did you do with ESPN?
I was initially hired to support the automation system that ran the radio network, and kind of did that throughout my whole tenure there. But for a while, I was doing the morning shift, so I got to do a lot of comedy bits for Mike and Mike and Colin Cowherd when he was there,
That's awesome.
and Scott Van Pelt and those guys. Yeah, that was fun.
Okay. Awesome.
Mostly Mike and Mike. That was kind of the one thing, because their production guy, they called him Joaquin. He and I got to be good buddies, and so we would do some pretty silly stuff.
I bet you had a blast doing that stuff too.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was literally, I mean, it was just he and I in the room together. But there were times where, a 30-second bit would take about 2 hours because we couldn't stop laughing. We just would make each other crack up. And that's, again, that's where the outtakes and this stuff really make what you're doing happen for me.
Yeah. So when did you leave ESPN?
I left them in 2011, and I moved back down to Texas. It had been 25 years or so since I'd lived here, bouncing around all over arable land, doing radio and IT work for software, and moved down here and got to work for a company that, it's a different automation company for radio stations around the country. And we actually have some stations in Chattanooga.
Any in particular?
Yes, I'm going to look them up right now. So please play, because I can't remember off the top of my head. And I'm sure if they're listening, I'm sorry, guys, we got 47 markets. I can't remember them all. Luckily, I can look.
Is it Cumulus?
Cumulus is another company. Yep. They run a different software. But okay, so the stations that we have are KXJ, LND, RXR, USY, and USY HD2.
WRXR is Rock 105.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And the last one you said is US 101. It's a country station.
Yep.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yep.
That's cool.
So I'm partially responsible for helping them stay on the air.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Please keep Rock 105 on the air.
Yes. No, I will.
So let's circle back. When did you get into voiceover work? When did that become a thing for you? Or I guess let's start with, when did that become a thing you thought you might want to do? And then, when did you come into doing that?
I think it's something that I always thought of because of my fan of animation and just doing silly voices and being silly. It just seemed kind of like a natural progression. I'm a cartoonist too, so I would always draw and do the voices in my head of what I thought those characters would be like. And seeing other people, there was a short-lived, unfortunately, website in the early 2000s, like around 1999, 2000, called icebox.com. And they made a bunch of really messed up cartoons, probably could keep up with, Rick and Morty and BoJack Horseman and all this stuff that's so popular right now. But they did things like called Zombie College and Mr. Wong and a bunch of other really funky stuff that you can probably still find online. But I started working with some other production guys. This was when I was in Chicago. And I got an agent and started auditioning, got some commercial work, some industrial work, and kind of going, oh, this was kind of fun. And really still had my eyes always on animation, because that's just kind of where my brain said, that's Mecca, that's your home. Go towards the light. And so I did a lot of that, and hooked up with a couple of other production guys who were also kind of into it, and were into writing comedy and things like that. So we did our own sketches. We kind of have reconnected recently, so we're trying to do some more of that stuff online. And so that's kind of really when it started. Like I said, right around 2000. I mean, I've been in radio since, golly, 1986. So I've kind of been always thought about doing voices for that. And once I got the agent in Chicago and was able to do more with those kinds of things, I really kind of kept going. And then I found the podcasting stuff, and moved to Connecticut doing the ESPN, and did a couple of video games, stuff like that. So it was, yeah, it's always been kind of in the back of my head, and something that just kind of never really leaves you. No matter how far out you go, I'm always coming back to it. So that's really, I guess, when it started. And I've been trying to keep my feet in it ever since.
Do you think your work in radio helped you culminate the idea to that maybe I can do more
I
voice
think
acting and things
so.
of that nature?
I think so. I mean, there's a I don't know if it's a stigma, but there's the voice acting, and then there's the broadcasting. And while there's a lot of intermingling, a lot of people think that, you're a broadcast guy, you do broadcast voice, you're going to sound like the, typical live from beautiful downtown Burbank, that kind of announcer type thing. But ultimately, most of those people are just silly, and frankly, they are held back because they have to be. And a lot of that stuff is always intrinsic as part of your writing. And yes, you have to pull it back because you have to think about audience and ratings and Nielsen books and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it did. I think ultimately what it really did was it taught me how to use a mic, which I know sounds kind of dumb, but there's mic technique that help you learn how to not, peg your meters and everything like that. And also how to use the mic as a tool. It's kind of like when you're a stage actor, you don't have the benefit of microphones necessarily, so you need to learn to project and stuff like that. And with microphones and radios, and it's a little different. There is a technique to it, and I think that helped. And also not being so turned off by my own voice. A lot of people go, I like doing voices, but I hate listening to myself. It's like, that's doing it is really kind of what helps you get over that. It's kind of a, fear of flying. You just got to keep doing it and doing it and doing it until it just becomes so route that you don't even think about it anymore. At least that's what helped me.
Okay.
I definitely get that. When we first started this, I hated listening back to edit the audio, because I just hated hearing my own voice. But now, 5 years in, it doesn't bother me anymore. Like, I'm accustomed to it, I'm used to it, and I can just by, certain things, I can distinguish, like, I need to turn this down, turn this up
Right.
in the audio file. So it does, you're right, it does help a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and they also, I mean, you're your own worst critic, right? So when
Yeah.
you have to listen to yourself, when you're editing yourself too, that's the other thing that radio helped me with, was learning how to edit. Um, when you're listening to yourself over and over and over again, it's like, oh God, I could have emphasized that word more. Or I could have done this better, or, here, let me just go record it again. And sometimes you don't have the time to do that. I mean, the nice thing about live theater, live radio is it's out there and it's gone. You did it, you did your best, and that's it. with this one, it's like, oh, maybe just 5 more minutes. I can re-record it. It's like, nope, just sometimes you just have to rip the Band-Aid off and cut it, get used to it. You made your choices, live with them. Damn it.
Bite the bullet.
Bite the bullet. Just do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
What were some of the first anime or animation that you started doing voice work for?
The very first anime I did, I was extremely lucky. I happened to be working at the software company that I was mentioning, and it was about a 10-minute drive to Funimation, their old studios. And I heard about a cattle call. I don't remember how. I may have just found it online. And so I sent in a tape. They said, come on in. And I did an audition for Mike McFarland for One Piece. And the very first time I auditioned, I got the gig. So I owe a lot of this to Mike. Thank you, Mike. And I was Iceberg in One Piece. That was the first thing I did for him. And luckily, a little bit before that, I had gotten an agent here in Texas, and they had sent me out on a few things, and I had gotten a couple of other commercials, and also did another little animation. There's a company here called Herald Entertainment, Herald, not Herald, Harold. It's Herald, like Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and it is a Christian. They do a lot of Christian animation, and they had this one cartoon that was just fabulous, and it had one of those things at the end where the guys who created it go, these are the lessons we learned from this animation, the show today. But it wasn't preachy. It was just a lot of fun. It was called give me a second, sorry, bare wires touching, I'll think about it in a second. But I got to play this old lady granny, do my little homage to June Foray in a very bad way, but it was so much fun. Her name was Granny Hot Sauce. And that was probably the first one where I really kind of got to, show my range a little bit, I think, in animation, and I had so much fun. Ryan DeFrades, thank you. That was what it was called.
Okay. What is your? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Just
I was just going to ask real quick, like, what is your? Because we've had many different voice artists come on the podcast, and we've talked to them at different conventions that we've done.
Sure.
Vic Minyama, Quentin Flynn, Stephanie Nadali. I've asked a question. What is your thought process with coming up with how you're going to make a character sound? Is it like a back and forth with the director? Do you have an idea in your head and you make a presentation? Like, what is your thought process when coming up with a voice for a character?
Well, these are two great examples of the two examples I gave you. So for Granny Hot Sauce, and yes, that's the character's name.
I love it.
They actually, when I got the audition from my agent, they said, we want you to voice, she has two sons that are kind of like, hey, Granny, what do you know, the big doofus, bad guy, rhino type, sidekicks. And they wanted me to voice for that. And I did. I auditioned for them. And then I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it because it'd be fun. And I think I can pull it off. And so as a voice actor, as an actor in general, you typically have your kind of quiver of arrows that you pull from. What your range is. Have some backstories for some of the characters that you do just as yourself, and you go, you know what, I want to borrow a little bit from that character that I do and a little bit of that character that I do, and kind of maybe do some animal husbandry with your voice and see if that works for the character that they're trying. And for Granny Hot Sauce, it was, she was a little old lady.
So she was in the back of my throat. And so I was trying to do a little old lady. And I had fun doing this voice, but she was also kind of a mole. So she had to have a little bit of a New York accent. So I kind of brought that in. And then because she was angry and explosive, she had to have this temper where she kind of kept going. And then she goes, hello, thank you for calling. And what are you talking about, you mokes?
And so I kind of, that's where that development of the character came from. Is you really just kind of take little bits and pieces and push them together and see what works. And in that case, that's what did that for that. With anime, when you get called in for a part, usually the director, or at least in my experience, the director has an idea of what they want the character to sound like, and you're usually cast based on what you typically sound like. I mean, I will never be a Chris Sabat or anybody with those kinds of pipes, that you could send industrial stuff through a subway through. But I have a certain range, and I think they kind of look for that. And when I did Iceberg, we kind of went through it a little bit, and it was my first time actually doing an anime, so it's like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. And Michael go, yeah, we remember. But I kind of faked it a little bit, and it was a little bit of my own voice, but Iceberg was kind of a little more, he was stuck up when he first showed up. Before he, if you remember the arc at all, he went through a lot. But at the very beginning, he was kind of, I'm the shipwright of Water 7, and he had this very particular type of delivery, and he had that kind of thing that he kind of did a lot. And that's kind of where we went with it. And so you try and find that through experimentation a little bit with the director and working with them for anime. And sometimes you get called in for parts where it's like, what do you got? And you give them, and you together massage that. It's like, okay, we need a little more of this, a little less of that. And you make sure that you can hit it every time. And that's where it goes. And you kind of run with it. And the cool thing about it is if it works, then you go, oh, there's another little arrow for my quiver. There's another little mix and match of animal characters that I put together. And that's something that maybe I can use to build off for somebody else.
Okay. Awesome.
Kind of works.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. So having done, various numerous voices, I always like to ask this question, and everybody kind of has a different answer. But how do you keep the voices from intermingling?
That's always the trick, right? And because you may or may not be using a voice that is in your mid-range. Your voice is usually right here. Sometimes it's going to be a little lower, sometimes a little higher. There may be other affectations that you have to remember, and it's really just like acting a character, on the stage or in videos or whatever. You just have to kind of remember it. And for a lot of voice actors, I know they usually have a phrase or something that they use to kind of get back into the voice, or a certain thing that they do warm-up wise. Sometimes if you do it long enough, it just becomes second nature. But usually for the ones that are not permanent, sorry, my cat wants in, they're not permanent, you usually kind of you need to find a hook, or at least that's what works for me. Is I need to find, okay, where was I last time I do it? And sometimes if especially if you're doing a show in anime and your arc is very far reaching and it's been a while, they'll play you samples so you can try and hear it back to where you were, and get it. And sometimes it takes a little massaging. Sometimes the muscle gets a little flabby, and you just have to kind of find it. But usually it doesn't take too long to drop back into it. I mean, they're not going to give you something that they don't think you can maintain, or at least that's been my experience. So they do, they work with you and what your tool set is that you're coming in with, and you kind of, then the rest is up to you, and you do your best. And every once in a while you'll be on a gig, it's like, oh, that was a little more Philip than Sengoku, we do that again, and you go, okay, I figured out where that was. Or you just kind of find the baseline and go from there.
That makes sense.
Does that
Yeah,
make
yeah,
sense?
that makes sense. Like I said, I've asked that several times, and you kind of get it's a similar answer, but a little different from each person. Everybody has their own technique of how to distinguish. Like for you, it'd be like distinguishing Sengoku from Iceberg, two characters in the same anime, but
Right.
you do that voice. Now this is kind of a little bit of a tricky question. Um,
Very good.
and it's like asking, of your children, which is your favorite. You never want to say, but you've voiced, probably 100 characters. And of those, I know they all kind of hold that special spot in your heart because it's you and you're coming up with this, but there has to be one that just kind of sticks out a little bit above the others as like your favorite voice to do.
Yeah, I mean, as far as anime goes, my most recent one that I did, thank you, Jerry Jewell, um, was the Sword of Bonds in a show called Ningen Fusion, which I really enjoyed doing that character. It was I don't know if it's going to come back for another season, but he was kind of, this magic sword with this kind of grumpy old man personality. I kind of, when I did the voice, I hear a lot of Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets, in my head when I'm kind of doing that character. I do love Sengoku, and I feel very honored that I got to follow Ed Blaylock's big shoes. I don't think we do the same character as with regards to that. I mean, he did the younger Sengoku, that was definitely Ed, and I think mine's kind of more the seasoned, gruff Sengoku, but I really do like doing him too because he's also kind of my um, homage to Alan Reed and Fred Flintstone a little bit, just a little bit, because he's got that kind of gruffness to him. The grump with the heart of gold kind of thing. But for me, most recently, the Sword of Bonds, which is the sword from Ningen Fusion, and sometimes it's not always the most recognizable or big Broadway marquee show that's your favorite. It's this guy, which I loved doing, and it just kind of clicked as soon as I started doing it. So it was kind of fun. I think originally they brought me on to be the announcer, which is always funny to me because I never think that I have a radio voice. I guess I do a little bit. People have told me that, but when you're growing up in radio, it's like, yeah, I don't sound like any of those guys. I'm not even in their league, but anyway, that's kind of what they say. So I think I was brought on originally as the narrator slash announcer for that, which is always fun to me too. But then it kind of merged into this the Sort of Bonds, which I just had a kick in the pants doing. He was so much fun. Get a haircut.
I need one.
Yeah, you and me both. And and there are a lot of roles that you do that again aren't maybe the big marquee roles. They're little character drops and stuff like that I just, you come in, it's like we just need a couple of these voices, and you are allowed to, I think, have a little more fun with it, maybe because they're just one shots and then they get eaten by a titan or something. But doing those kind of announcer type voices are fun. And anytime where I can have a little fun. I think there is a character, and forgive me, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but Mike McFarlane again called me in, and he just died in this recent arc in One Piece, but he looks like a vampire, and he said, we want someone who can do a bad Bella Lugosi, Count Chocula type voice. And so I did, and it was so much fun. And anytime I can make Mike laugh or anybody in the booth laugh is fun for me. So that one's a fun one too.
Yeah, you keep bringing up Mike. We had him. We actually met him was last year at
Last year,
a
FarleyCon.
FarleyCon,
convention.
yeah.
Yeah, a local convention here called FarleyCon, and
Oh,
you know
cool.
he graced us with the opportunity to speak with him for about 5 minutes.
Yep.
He was super busy, and we'd love to, get him on to sit down for a longer form at some
Sure.
point when
Sure.
he's not busy. He's super busy, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was such a joy to talk to, just for the 5 minutes
Mhm.
that we had, and you could tell he really enjoyed what he was doing.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, it's kind of cool when you get hooked up with the guys at Funimation Crunchyroll. Now it's fun when you can go, oh, hey, I got a guy, I worked with in this show. He'd be good for this part for your show. And you kind of get bounced around. That was another, I got a part in Fairy Tale um, as a character called Brain. Actually, he was three characters technically, but the first one he was Brain, then he turned to Zero, then he turned into the LaPointe character. But Brain was also fun because he was classic, you know, almost mustache twirling bad guy in my head anyway. So I had a lot of fun doing him too. Mike's
Yeah.
awesome. I actually owe all of everything with Funimation to Mike, because if it had been for him opening the door, I wouldn't probably be having this chat with you guys.
You probably still would in some way, maybe just not in the capacity that you think.
True.
Yeah.
Now I know you got to work on a Junju Ito collection at one point.
Oh yeah.
So what was it like going from kind of the shonen-esque animes where it's like One Piece, My Hero,
Mhm.
and then you're doing this horror thing in Junju Ito. What was it like going from that to the other? Uh,
It was, it really is. It's like just flexing a different muscle. And it's the the um the feeling when you get into it, obviously true. One Piece is a very specific type of anime. Um, and and there are so many kind of shades of gray in there, but when you kind of walk in and say, okay, this one's going to be more horror, this is going to be more sedate, you're a dad, you're a grandfather. But I did enjoy doing that one. That was the Ringmaster, right?
yes, sir.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, because it was kind of, I almost kind of felt like a Batman villain, circling back to the whole thing, because it was, I loved the story, and I loved the showmanship when he was, in the spotlight, literally in front of the audience, and then the kind of get him off the stage kind of stuff in the background. That was a lot of fun for me, because it was, the feeling was different. The voice work is the voice work, and I had a lot of fun. Again, that was also Mike directing me in that one as well. And it's fun to be the bad guy. It's always fun to be the bad guy.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I remember, a lot of people say, well, it's about the writing, it's about the blah blah. It's like, no, it's just fun to be the bad guy. It's fun to be everybody. Batman's fun, Superman's fun, but everybody wants to be the Joker. Thank you, Mark Hamill. But everybody, or Cesar Romero, everybody wants to be the Joker. Everybody wants to be, because especially for comic book or anime villains, they are bigger than life, and you can really kind of go to town and have fun with them. Not because you've got some inner dark soul that wants to, strangle birds on your free time. It's just, it's a license to cut loose, because that's what they would do.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of felt, being the ringmaster. He was a fun evil character to be. And actually, when I watched it afterwards, it was kind of more along lines of Twilight Zone kind of feeling. I mean, he wasn't Joker over the top, but it was like, this is the darker side of humanity, nasty part. But that was a fun bit to play. It really was.
Yeah. Junji Ito is a master at horror, the macabre, the weird kind of stuff, the almost like the taboo stuff that you're not really supposed to like talk about, or like, it's like one of my favorite Junji Ito stories is the Hanging Balloons, which
Okay.
is basically where I don't know if you've heard the story or not, but basically the Hanging Balloons is basically there are basically these balloons. And normally if you get a balloon filled with helium, you have a string that holds it. The string is actually a noose, and the
Okay.
balloon is the head of the person that it's coming after.
Okay.
And the idea is it comes and it takes you away by hanging you and taking you away into the sky. So you think, I'm just going to shoot down the balloon. If you kill the balloon, you kill yourself.
Right.
So the whole time you're trying to avoid your balloon it's weird, but if you like it, if look into it, if you like it, awesome. If you don't, cool, I understand. But it is a very fascinating story. And the artwork that goes along with the story, just it's like I said, macabre, very scary, very weird stuff, And then circling back one more time to what you said about where you said, everybody wants to be a Joker. I had a buddy of mine tell me this the other day. He said, when you're a child, you admire Batman. When you're an adult, you end up understanding the Joker.
Yep.
I think that's a very interesting thing, how the your reasoning and your logic kind of
Yep.
changes as you get older and you understand certain things.
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, just like the Junji Ito and some of the other stuff, there's lots of shades of gray. When I was a kid growing up with comic books, there was good, there was evil. It literally was black and white. Lex Luthor, who cared? He just wanted to be the bad guy. That was his lot. That was his motivation. He just wanted to kill Superman. He wanted to rule the world, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And now, like it or not, because of people like us growing up who are now also writing comics, it's like, yeah, that's a little one-dimensional. Can I add a little bit into it? I didn't necessarily like, not to kind of go off on tangent here, I didn't necessarily like what they did with Luthor when they what was it, 1986-ish, I think, with the Infinite Earths, Crisis on Infinite Earths happened, and they kind of rewrote everybody's backstory, and he was just kind of a nasty, billionaire, blah blah blah. But then they started morphing it back in, rolling him back into the original. So he's a billionaire, businessman, scientific genius, who has this thing against aliens. It's like, ooh, that's really interesting. And the cool thing about a lot of the anime that I've seen, you've got the big kind of, I don't want to say cartoony, but kind of the big One Piece types of shows that are just big and bombastic, and there's a lot of deep depth to them, but there's also just a lot of kind of Warner Brothers kind of silly stuff too. But then you got the more quiet stories. I remember the first time I saw a Miyazaki cartoon, I was crawled up in a ball going, oh my God, this is like one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen in my life. And then you got other stuff like Attack on Titan and things like that, or the other things that are subtle or dark or sexy or grown up or whatever, and it's just peeling back the layers. It's definitely fun and different, and it really is kind of like acting. You're really just enjoying being the role in the world that role is happening. Yeah, sorry, kind of bounced around a little bit there.
No, it's fine.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. I mean, this is your story, not ours. We're just kind of facilitating the questions as we see them pop up.
Understood, sure.
So we can tell by your background that you're like a huge Marvel fan. I'm just joking.
I do not diss Marvel. Now I will say one thing, sorry, just to play off you for a second, Chip. The one thing that drove me bananas when I was a kid reading comics was I wanted the superheroes that were, yes, super powerful to come in, vanquish evil, save the day. I didn't really care about the superheroes who couldn't pay rent or had girlfriend problems. I'm dealing enough of that as it is. Not the girlfriend problems. I just didn't have any. But I needed the escapism, and I think at that age, at that time, DC provided that more than Marvel did. And I know that was the big selling point for the folks who are really, really Marvel centric. And that was one of the big selling points that Stan Lee used to talk about all the time, was like, these are real people with real problems. It's like, for me, that didn't attract me. That's not to say that I didn't read Spider-Man comics or Incredible Hulk or any of the other ones. I was a big fan of Nova when I was a kid. I think that's one of the things that Marvel did get, because in DC, the kids were sidekicks. In Marvel, the kids were heroes who were just teenagers that were super powerful, which I kind of dug. So I will give Marvel that. But it was just, I was more the Superman, not necessarily Shazam is another person. Well, Captain Marvel, the first Captain Marvel. If we're going to get into the Marvel versus DC thing, the real Captain Marvel, I was a huge fan of his because, talk about wish fulfillment. Kid says a magic word and turns into an adult superhero. Huge, big thing for me when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah. My question was going to be: I see you have a big collection of
Yes.
Superman stuff. When did you start collecting all of your Superman stuff, and why Superman?
You know what? I'm sure a psychiatrist could write a book as far as a why Superman. Again, I think it was not as much of the Shazam Captain Marvel kid saying a magic word thing as it was the original iterations of Clark Kent, when he was the geeky, you know, couldn't get the girl, couldn't, win the day. He was always nauseous, had to run off, blah, 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 blah. And then, in the phone booth or the storeroom, rip off and become Superman. There is that kind of escapism thing that I kind of liked. I was also I was attracted a lot to Superboy, and Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. The whole 30th century thing. There's a future sci-fi part of it, but they were teenagers who were superheroes. I was the kid who ran around in the backyard with the red towel around his neck and pretended to fly and fight evil. That was totally me to a T. I was the one who had all the superhero costumes for Halloween. And the first, I had a lot of those original Mego characters when I was a kid. Those were the first real action figures that I remember. And yes, they're action figures. They're not dolls. Shut up.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I had a lot of those growing up. And then when you get into high school and other stuff, you kind of put away those toys. I broke a lot of mine, unfortunately. But I still kept some things. I don't have a whole lot left from when I was a kid. But I would say probably when my kids were little and I was buying toys for them, so they could play, probably the little kid in me woke up and say, hey, I want some too. Now, I'll admit, as you can probably see, I don't unwrap or unbox a lot of mine on purpose, because it's the kind of holding on to those that you hold dear childhood thing. I just kind of want to keep them pristine. That's just silly me. But I'd say probably in the early 2000s, there was also a thing with DC. They had a little toy company called DC Direct, where they would do lots of cool, it just wasn't, Superman with a shield. Why does Superman need a shield? But it was, some, they used to call them imaginary tales. They do different things from the comics, and they turn those into toys. And I loved that. So I just glommed on and started buying those. And it kind of exploded a little bit.
I definitely can understand that. Like I was telling you before we hit the record button, I do unboxings and reviews of toys on our YouTube channel here, and then I've got some 40 uh boxes of toys to unbox. And there are some that it does hurt to unbox them. But I'm also that kind of guy who I like to get them out and pose them
Yep.
and take pictures of them and stuff like that. So, I
Well, my sister is a big toy collector too. She kind of likes some of the more avant-garde stuff, some of the street art, pop art kind of action figures and statues. um, I right now, you love them or hate them, I love a lot of the stuff that Todd McFarlane's doing. You can't see over here on my right hand side, and I've been a fan of Todd McFarlane since Spawn. Again, the Spider-Man thing notwithstanding, I have a lot of the original Spawn comics when he first came out from back in the day. So when he started making these toys and doing a pretty darn good job with a lot of the stuff, I go, ooh, I've got a whole wall of Todd McFarlane stuff over here that you can't see. Um, but yeah, those I've unboxed a couple. Like when people go, "Oh, do you have this?" I go, "No, I don't," and they get it to me, and I have two, so I'll unbox one and leave the other one boxed. But then when Superman the animated series came out, my wife and I would go to the McDonald's or Burger King. I can't remember. One of them had them in their probably McDonald's with their Happy Meal toys. So I got a bunch of those. I got two of each of those for the same reason, unboxed one and left the other one in the wrapper. Um, but I still have a few things from when I was a kid, mostly books or small statues and stuff like that, because the other ones just didn't survive my childhood. Um, but yeah, it's a problem and I'm seeking help, but I don't, honestly, I don't care. This is, it makes you happy. That's what, as long as nobody's getting hurt and I can still pay my bills, I'm okay. And I'm pretty easy to shop for.
I clearly
Yes, yes.
just actually I have a book, and if you don't have it off air, I'll get your address and send it to you. It's 101 Reasons to Love Superman.
Oh, that's cool. No, I have not
um
heard that one. This one, I have it here. This is not the one I owned as a kid because I probably broke the binder and it fell apart. But I got this. See if I can get it close to the camera without it zoom. Here, I'll just hold it back here.
oh I had also had that book,
Um,
I
and I
think
don't
my
know what
father had that.
yeah. So I mean, it's obviously old school Superman before the crisis, before the 80s, before he got dark with long hair. Um, and that's kind of my Superman. That's the stuff that I adored and loved growing up. Not the campy stuff, but just the stuff that ooh, you guys switched places. That was weird. But yeah, so I'm not gonna ever not like him. I just think sometimes people are getting a little too. I don't. Have you ever read the series? The one with Manchester Black, the Elite, Superman and the Elite.
No.
It's a great series, and it's a nice commentary on basically the dark anti-superhero genre that popped up from the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and they kind of battle Superman. It's a good series, and they made an animated movie of it, which was okay. It's pretty good, pretty faithful to the comic, but there's a lot more in the comic. Well, that to me kind of congealed basically what I loved about Superman and what I kind of didn't love as much about the darker anti-heroes. And I'm sorry, I know we're supposed to talk about animation and voiceover, but
No, no,
I
no.
obviously
Oh,
keep Superman very close to my heart. I'm excited, curious, a little nervous to see what happens with the new Superman that's coming out.
The
uh,
James Gunn,
the
Peter
James Gunn
Safran.
version. Yep.
Yeah.
The All-Star Superman comic, the series, was probably one of my favorite all-time Superman hero stories ever. Period. I absolutely loved it. I'm big fan of, all the Neil Gaiman and the kind of the British wave of people that came in and started writing comics. They got dark, but they also were very true to the characters in a lot of other ways. But I'm being cautiously optimistic because I thought Henry Cavill was not necessarily the movies, but Henry Cavill, personified the Superman that I grew up to me. He was perfect. And I loved the S insignia that they changed. That's like my favorite. When I get a tattoo, that's what I'm getting on my ankle. That's that.
So is he your, I guess, so is he your favorite live action
Yes.
Superman?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, again, nothing against the movies. They weren't my favorite, but he was my favorite Superman. Now, Christopher Reeve was, came out when I was in that very impressionable age, but I was also way too literal about my love of comics. It's like, why does Superman have a sweat stain? I don't get that. What's with the S he's throwing? And I can't, he's shooting a beam from his finger. What the hell is that? I was very comic centric at that time. So I was very impressionable. So I loved Christopher Reeve as Superman, but to me, the embodiment of it for me, live action was Henry Cavill. Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to Superman, do you read any of the Elseworld stuff?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So one of my favorites, and I'm sure you have read it, is Red Sun.
Oh gosh, yes. Yep. Love
I,
that one.
I love that one. And
One.
it just shows like if his pod had crash landed anywhere other than Kansas, like what could have happened.
Yep. Every time I read that one, I think back to the old Saturday Night Live with the original cast. Well, maybe not the original cast, but they did a play on that with Dan Aykroyd playing Uberman and what would have happened if his rocket had landed in Nazi Germany, which is ironic and very similar to a certain extent. But it was more for comedy in that particular case. But yeah, back in the day, they called those imaginary tales. Now they're calling them Elseworld. Same idea. Not continuity, or are they? Kingdom Come is probably one of the best stories, illustrated and written, that I can, Mark Waid and Alex Ross. I can't even put into words in my brain what that was. A wonderful story. But there's also other ones. I've read a lot of Batman ones, like is that over here? I think it's downstairs. The one where is it Blood Rain? Where he's actually a vampire, or actually Dracula comes, bites him, and he's fighting, becoming a vampire until the very end. Yeah, there's lots of really good. Those Elseworld ones are great.
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
Yeah. Red Sun actually, and again, I heard this third hand, so it may not be the truth, but did you ever hear of a movie called Brightburn?
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Basically, it's Red Sun on steroids. Basically, right. It's like what happens if Superman comes to Earth, but he's already evil,
right?
And it's like it's in the supernatural.
Well, you know who did that movie, right? James Gunn.
Really?
It's a James Gunn written story.
That's funny. I did
not know that.
Yeah, James Gunn wrote that story. I don't think he directed it, but I know he wrote it.
Yeah, I knew he didn't direct it. I didn't know he wrote it. That's interesting.
That was in between his time of doing Guardians 1 and 2, I believe. And technically he couldn't be with DC, so he made his own superhero or non-Marvel hero.
Right.
Movie.
Or villain in this case.
Right. Well, in the movie, it does do a lot of the this and this causes this kind of situation, so it could have been stopped or changed or different, something like that.
Oh,
kind of
Uh,
like
oh,
the flashpoint or the nail or those types of things, like
yeah,
the ripples
yeah.
in time type of deal.
yeah. I don't want to spoil it because it's really, I think it's really well written. Um, the direction of it could have been probably a little bit smoother. There's some clunky parts, but I mean, you're doing an evil super child movie, so how much can you really do and make it
Right.
smooth?
Yeah. Yeah. James Gunn and Kenneth Wong did the production on it, and it was actually written by Brian and Mark Gunn.
Oh,
Ooh,
Mark Gunn did it. My fault. I
Yeah.
know it's
I
one
mean,
of the
but
Guns.
James produced it, so
Yeah, I know it was one of the Gunn brothers out of all like, the four of them.
yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's there again going there a lot of those imaginary tales of Superman. Those were kind of some of my favorite. Now, granted, back in the 60s, they were a little more lighthearted. But some of the other ones that they've had recently are just a lot of fun. I'm not allowed to buy comics anymore because apparently I'm spending too much time on money on toys. So but every once in a while I'll get a couple or get a compendium or like a graphic novel that's got a series all into one. Those are kind of
Mhm.
nice.
I actually like some of the fan fiction that's out there. Some of it can be a little campy, but then there are others that's like, as long as the story is good and it's, at least gives some credence to the source material and at least has somewhat history behind it, or at least make it make sense. I guess would be the best way to say it. As long as it makes sense, to the reader or to the source material, then I don't see anything wrong with, fan fiction. In fact, like what we talked about Red Sun, Brightburn, there's a whole bunch of other fan fiction that comes along afterwards that it's like, man, this is really, really good. I'd like to see this made into a live action or animation in some respects.
Well, and it's funny circling back to the whole voiceover and podcasting thing. The first company I think I mentioned to you called Pendant Audio was the first audio drama OTR podcasting thing that I really kind of worked with when I was living in Connecticut. And they did a bunch of fan fiction. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were kind of like their big ones. And I started slowly kind of eking my way up. And I think that was probably the first big role that I did for them was playing General Zod on one of their fan fiction. And they are Tilly and Susan Britches. They're the ones who run the company. They've unfortunately gotten away from the fan fiction because of too many C&Ds coming down. We did one for Back to the Future, which was really, really awesome and a lot of fun. And I got to play Doc Brown. But apparently Paramount found out about it and said, no, thank you. Thanks, but no thanks. And then I think just to be on the safe side, they decided to yank some of the other ones. But I got to be General Zod, which was cool because I actually got to be three characters in that arc because I got started out with General Zod, and then I actually before that I was Desaad from Apocalypse, so I got to play Desaad, and then they brought in General Zod, and then they brought in Brainiac, and there were a couple of scenes where I got to play against myself, all three of us in one room kind of thing, which was a lot of fun. Um, but there's a time travel aspect of it where they, derailed Superman's rocket ship, so he never landed. General Zod came, took over, the whole dark world type of thing. And that was a lot of fun to do. Same kind of idea. Yeah, that they were very, very mindful of and huge fans of the genre. So they didn't do it to poke fun. They did it because they loved it and they wanted to pay homage to something that they hold near and dear to their heart. So there was definitely a lot of that. I have a lot of that not saved in any way, shape, or form that I don't listen to from time to time because I would get in trouble, but it's fun to remember them.
It's always fun to remember.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that those were a lot of fun.
So I don't know if you noticed, but Spotify teamed up with Marvel and DC to do like their own audio comic dramas kind of things.
I heard
They-
inklings of that recently. I haven't seen anything since, but
so they've done for Marvel, they've done Wastelands, which focuses on Peter Quill after Doctor Doom took over and did a lot of apocalyptic stuff, destroyed a lot of the world and everything like that. And it's old man Quill trying to team up with other people and restore everything. But on DC's end, they've done a couple of Batman ones.
Mm.
One is an original story where it is I can't remember. It's a new character they made just specifically for it, and it's sort of like Hush, but it's not exactly Hush. And I know they were going to do a Superman one, but I don't know if they've done it yet or not. But you should probably check them out. They're pretty interesting. They're really
Oh no,
well
I definitely
done.
will. Thank you for and I listen to Spotify. I have the unpaid version, so I have to listen to commercials, but that's okay. I I miss doing those. I miss listening to them. I actually played Hush in the Batman version of that pendant audio thing that I was mentioning, which was fun.
Cool.
And man, Chip, we'll talk offline. I'll see if I can hook you up.
Of course.
All three of y'all, but
Appreciate that.
no, absolutely. If I can find them, I think I've got them stored somewhere on a disk somewhere. 400 floppies. The that's kind of cool. I wonder. And that's the funny thing is once you're bit by this bug, doing voice acting, cartoon, any of this stuff, even if it's from the fan fiction side of it,
Hmm.
there's no going back. I mean, you can't not do it. And I miss it. I mean, I don't have a professional studio. I actually have like a little closet over here with a mic that works, and it works well. It's a nice mic. But even if you can't, pay the bills with it, doing some of these audio drama podcasts, fan fiction things, it's really like community theater, dinner theater of the air. No, you're not going to, pay your mortgage with it, but if you love it, you can't not do it. And so being able to do it that's everything.
It gives you an escape.
Totally. Absolutely. And it lets you flex your muscles, lets you kind of keep in shape if you are, have aspirations, bigger, better things. And even if those don't necessarily pan out, I mean, I know lots and lots of actors who pay their bills, but they're not movie stars. They don't have ginormous mansions in Bel Air. They are working stiffs just like the rest of us. They just happen to be actors, not, IT techs or, whatever, real estate agents. So, um, yeah, I was looking up before we came online with this for some of the other ones that I've done, and I did a lot of them again in the early 2000s. Some of them have gone away, some of them have been merged, some of them have gone and come back. But I do miss it, and doing these kind of little chats remind me how much I miss it. And so, who knows? Maybe you'll hear some more of me on those, in the not too distant future.
Awesome.
We'll look forward to it.
Thank
Definitely
you.
enjoy it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But real quick on Spotify, they have two Batman ones. One is Batman Unburied, which is the one I listened to, and that one is The Villain's the Harvester.
Okay.
Then they did one recently called The Riddler: Secrets in the Dark.
Okay. I do remember seeing something about that.
They recently did a Harley Quinn and Joker. Um, and the Harley Quinn's actually played by Christina Ricci in that one.
Interesting.
Then they have the Marvel Wastelanders, which is their big one. I think it's they've done 10 volumes of it with different heroes with each one.
Wow.
Then they've just started doing X-Men, the audio drama based on the Uncanny X-Men lineage.
Okay.
And then they started Marvel's Wolverine, The Lost Trail, which is an original with Wolverine in Louisiana.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I mean,
But
that's the cool thing about the podcasting stuff is you can have a lot of fun and you don't have to worry about hiring big Hollywood stars to be in front of the camera. I mean, anybody with a mic and chops or, who wants to be part of it can.
Oh, for sure.
And
I'd love to do an audio drama one time.
we'll do it. Go for it. Do audition. I mean, I've, every once in a while you'll get somebody coming up and go, "Hey, Philip, how'd you get into it? How'd you get started? Do you have any advice?" And, really the best advice is just to do it. Even if it's at the very least recording yourself reading to your kids in character voices. I mean, when I did that to my kids, they go, "Daddy, talk regular." So I didn't get to have as much fun as I wanted to early on. But yeah, just do it. I mean, you can get a nice little microphone, and computers are dirt cheap these days, relatively speaking. Everybody's got one. Heck, just have fun.
When me and Chip first started the podcast, we did it on our phones.
Yep.
Like literally, we plugged a microphone. I was about maybe that big into it, and that's how we recorded the first 50 episodes of the podcast.
I have one of those little
You still got it, Chip?
microphones.
Yeah, I think he's looking for it right now. You see it?
It's probably in my camera bag.
Yeah. It
'Cause
looks like a little Rocky Rabbit's foot.
Yep.
Okay.
I carry it with me to every convention that we have or that we go to, just kind of as a reminder of like this is where I started, and now I have multiple microphones and multiple cameras and
Sure.
everything, but I started with this.
Well, and that's the best part. Even if you started and are still with that, as long as you're loving what you're doing and enjoying it and talking to other people who feel the same, don't give it up. Just
Right.
keep having fun. If you're in it for, to get wealth and famous, then you may not be in it for the right reasons. Not that those are wrong reasons. I would love to have those reasons, but or those trappings, but it is definitely something that you do for the love of doing it.
Yes.
And if you're lucky enough to be able to do it professionally, more power to you. But really, anybody who wants to get into it, okay, yeah. I have something very similar, slightly different
That's
windscreen
it.
on it, but
Yeah, and it just plugs into the
yep.
bottom of your phone,
What
and
version is what mic is that? Do you know?
It's a
it's a
Booyah.
it's a Booyah
Okay.
DM100.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had one that a voiceover friend of mine told me to get. She said she used it a lot and it also had the ability to change the pickup patterns on it and stuff like that.
This one does as well.
Yep. So you can do the podcasting because you can do the
Omnidirectional.
omnidirectional or bidirectional if you want. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. Have fun. I mean, thank you guys for having me and inviting me to this. It's fun for me to talk about it. And just kind of, I was the shy little kid growing up without, a lot of outlets who literally, I remember I got a little Panasonic tape recorder and I recorded from the old Shazam, the Filmation Shazam live action thing, the one with where they're driving around in the Winnebago and everything, very 70s, recording him saying Shazam. And so I'd like take the little recording with me, run around the bush and say, play the thing and pretend like I was getting hit by lightning. So yeah, just the geeks will inherit the world. Darn it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Chip.
I was just going to say, I mean, we'll touch on it again later, but we greatly appreciate you, joining us and kind of sharing your story. I mean, such an interesting story, and I mean, you really are just like us. Like, I don't mean to speak for Talon or Roger, but we're the shy kids that grew up without an outlet, and we were kind of picked on and everything.
Bullied.
And,
yep.
Oh yeah.
And then, we found comics and, anime, and, that became our outlet. And, then we, started the podcast, which became another outlet. And now we go to conventions and cover conventions, and, we get to talk to and interview more like-minded people, and it's just a blessing.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting. I haven't been to too many conventions, but
That's a
you know what?
shame.
I know
Yeah.
I appreciate it. If you know anybody, get the word out.
I
I love
We know
going to them.
several. We know several
Definitely.
people.
We know a couple. We'll get
definitely know a few.
I'm kind of one of those guys when I first started going to them, actually, and you know Aaron pretty well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
When he and Charlie reached out to me and they said, "Would you mind signing a few things for charity?" I go, me, really, me? I'm nobody. I didn't think. I thought they were being just overly kind, or they had hit their heads together. But
Sympathy works, I guess.
exactly, right, that too. But when you go to these conventions and you meet, people like us, that that makes it all worthwhile to me. I mean, you go up there and you talk to people, and this is definitely the extroverted introvert or the introverted extrovert's outlet. It needs to be. And the best part about the internet, and I'm sorry, I don't care what Congress says, platforms like TikTok or Instagram or anything else out there like that, do it. I mean, that's all I can say is just be Nike, do it, because if you love it and you build it, they will come, and you will find your people. You will realize that you're not alone, that there are lots of other people like you who have the same interests, similar interests, and love what you do, will love what you do, and maybe want to be part of it, or let you be part of what they're doing.
Yeah. It's so interesting because when we were like what we talked about like just a few seconds ago, when we were younger, we would get picked on and made fun of because we liked superheroes and cartoons and even in my case, pro wrestling, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And then as you get older, you realize like, you know what, there are so many more people that are like me that I never knew about.
Yep.
And now I'm among my people. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So it's like
Yep.
it's so much fun to just go to a convention, meet with people who are like-minded, have conversations, sometimes debates, about, like Batman could totally kick Superman's ass. Shut up.
No, he couldn't.
With the right preparation, he could.
You know what? And I had a conversation with a friend of my daughter's not too long ago, and blah blah blah. I go, yeah, but that's all in the writing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, I felt bad popping her bubble like that, but it was a friendly, jesting conversation like that. But that's the fun part. I mean, I loved those amalgam comics they came out with a while where they combined the
Yes.
both, or when they had the
Yeah.
Avengers versus the Justice League. I mean, that was just like mind blowing. Wow, my whole world is congealing together. This is perfect.
Batman
Oh, and
versus
you
Ninja
know what?
Turtles.
I haven't seen that yet. I really want to see it, but it's
Oh,
not
it's really
streaming on
good.
any of the
It's great.
anything that I. It looks good. The little snips I've seen on TikTok look awesome.
Yeah.
Is it not on HBO Max or whatever it's
No,
called
it's
now?
not. It's on something that I don't have. And oh wait, I just signed up for Apple. Maybe it's on Apple. Unless you signed up for Apple, but you still have to pay for it. I don't know.
It's on Prime.
Yeah.
I have Prime,
Oh,
but I think you still have to
you
pay
have to
for
pay
it.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I,
Prime, but not that Prime.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not
Like,
Prime plus secret back whatever.
right.
Yeah.
Like I recently just went back and I started because I was a big fan of Batman the animated series growing
Oh
up.
God, yeah, yep.
And I went back and I watched like a lot of the movies that I didn't really watch when I was a kid. I mean, I watched the series obviously, but I never seen like, so I went back and I watched like The Mask of Phantasm.
Oh,
I
yep.
went back and watched Red Hood,
Sub-Zero.
Sub-Zero. Yep.
Sub-Zero. Probably the one that I'm glad I mean, it's the one that I don't let my kids watch, which is The Killing Joke. I can't let them watch that one.
Mm.
Because of a certain scene in the
Yep.
in the
Yep.
thing. But yeah, I mean, going back and looking at all those, I'm like, man, this is like you're reliving your childhood all over again and stuff. But now it's like my son and my daughter started watching the animated series, which my son's 10 now, so he's like a little bit. My daughter, she's glued to it, and my son's off doing something. I'm like, are you not going to watch this? He goes, yeah, I'll be back in a minute. don't see him for like 20 minutes. And meanwhile, my 3-year-old is just sitting there, just glued to the television.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, she's way more into it than he is. Although he's more into anime than
Right.
his sister is. Like he's watching Hunter x Hunter and Demon Slayer and Spy Family and stuff like that. He watches Naruto, but he watches it with the subtitle. He only watches it on like we have a app called Pluto TV,
Sure.
and
Yep.
it has the all day anime channel, and mostly I don't like it because it just repeats the same animes over and over again. It's normally it's Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece are the only shows that it plays most of the time.
Right.
Or anytime I try to watch it, that's just
the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah, the big three basically.
Yeah.
So
well, it's not Pokemon, so I mean nothing against Pokemon. Pokemon, Digimon. You know what? The funny thing is the first anime I ever remember watching was when I was a kid, and there were reruns of Speed Racer. And when I first started acting in anime, I was going, am I going to have to say after everything I say?
Hmm.
Boy, there's a little bit of So, but no, not so much. I loved that. So, yeah.
Well, while we got you here for, I guess, one last question, is there any upcoming projects that you're currently working on that you would like to maybe tell our fans about?
Oh golly, I wish. There's a few things I have in the works. I'm still waiting to hear. There's some that I would really love to be a part of, but haven't heard yet. So again, that's kind of part of the acting game, is you audition and then you just kind of let it go away. And if it works, great. If not, then on to the next thing. So
NDAs, I understand. It's okay.
No. Well,
I'm kidding.
that and crossing fingers and throwing salt and knocking formica, but whatever. It's all good. There's a few things I would love to be part of that I've auditioned for. I don't know if it's going to come to fruition, but we'll see. I wish I had a better answer for you, but right now it's try to keep all those stations in Chattanooga on the air.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Save Rock 105. Rest in peace.
Yes,
Boner.
sir. Done.
Are you on social media?
I am. I'm on TikTok, which I'll have to look up because I don't write myself. I'm on TikTok and Instagram, and I'll tell you what they are right now. Instagram is at Philip Weber 0511. So now you know my birthday. And I have 2 TikToks, but the one that just kind of I happened to start posting all my stuff with, accidentally not realizing I couldn't merge accounts yet, is Philip Weber 287. I do have a regular Philip Weber one, but it doesn't have much on it. So you'll see lots of things with my cat that I rescued, and then some other stuff, videos from cons and stuff, promotional videos. So
awesome, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Roger, you have any last questions?
No, I mean, just more probably just the audio drama stuff I asked was probably my big ones. I mean, I'm a big fan of those, just like everybody else here. So I mean, maybe one day we'll be able to do one together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be so fun.
Or at least record you doing one.
Right.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Or you know what? Or you guys can write your own, and I'll happily be part of it. How's that?
We might be able to do that.
Yeah.
We'll just call it
get
the toy collectors.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What if we did one to where it's like Toy Story mixed with WrestleMania, like the wrestling figures come to life and they have to do their own little thing or whatever, but it's like, because we were all 3 in the wrestling business, so maybe we're doing like backstage stuff or something, like why are they fighting, like why is this guy going to be the toy champion and not me, like I don't know, I'm just throwing shit against the wall.
No, absolutely. And I loved all those stories, comic book, fantasy, whatever, where there was some magic, some special meteor, some whatever that imbued some schmo with superpowers, or animated dolls, or I still love all that kind of stuff, and those are the fun stories. But I mean, you write when you're a kid, there's like but they're still back there, they're still turning.
Right.
Slightly better writer now.
Well, Philip, we don't want to hold you up too long. I'm sure you got got some yard work to do or something like me.
I gotta get ready to go to work. So
Oh boy. Yeah.
So we greatly appreciate you joining us. Like I said before, just kind of a meeting of like-minded people, and it has
Absolutely.
been an honor to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Thank you guys so much for reaching out. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. And
Yes.
anytime you need anything, just reach out.
awesome. We appreciate that. If you can just hang on for just 1 second while we pay some
Absolutely.
bills. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight to this episode. We really do appreciate Philip for joining us tonight. Chip, Roger, anything you guys want to say before we bounce out of here?
Chip.
Yeah, that's
As
your cue, Chip.
always, please do not leave without leaving a like, comment, share, and subscribe on Spotify and right here on YouTube.
Now it's your turn, Roger.
And as always, thank you guys for commenting, subscribing, sharing everything. We've been getting a lot of traction here recently. Great going out to cons and actually getting to meet some of you people and just talking and everything like that, and getting to meet just regular people like us and hearing your stories too. So if you guys want us to come out to one of your conventions and hang out, just let your people know.
Exactly. And if you want to continue to support Movement Radio, check out streamlabs.com/movement radio/merch and go copy some merch. Once again, Philip, thank you for joining us. Thank you guys for watching tonight. And as always, thank you, and we'll see you next time. I'm Talon Williams.
I'm Chip Hazard,
I'm Roger Sierra.
I'm Philip Weber.
and this is Movement Radio.
God's plan.